The canine German Shepherd refused to leave the casket. When the casket opened, everyone cried. He sat there, motionless, silent, guarding the casket as if his very soul was inside it. No one dared approach. Not the soldiers, not the family, not even the chaplain. The canine German Shepherd, named Valor, hadn't moved since the flag was draped over the wood. He hadn't eaten. He hadn't blinked. It was as if he knew, as if he understood that the one person he loved more than life itself was gone. But then, the unexpected happened. The casket shifted. A sound broke the silence. And what followed, no one in that room will ever forget. It wasn't just a reunion. It was a miracle that would leave every heart broken and healed. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on notifications. This helps us bring more powerful and inspiring stories like this to you. The sky over Arlington was a steel gray, heavy with clouds that threatened to burst at any moment. Rows of white headstones stretched across the perfectly trimmed grass, each one marking a life given in service. A quiet, reverent breeze swept through the cemetery, rustling the flags held by uniformed soldiers standing in solemn formation. But all eyes were on one figure: a dog. Valor, a highly decorated canine German Shepherd, sat perfectly still beside the casket, draped in the American flag. His black and tan coat was dulled by dust and sorrow. He didn't whine. He didn't bark. He didn't meep. His eyes were locked on the closed casket as if waiting, hoping for it to open and bring back the man who meant everything to him. Sergeant Luke Matthews, 32, had served 3 tours overseas. But his most faithful partner, through every deployment, ambush, and mission, had been Valor. The two were inseparable, on and off duty. It was Valor who had saved Luke from an IED blast in Kandahar, Valor, who stood between him and armed insurgents, and Valor who, in the end, returned from the mission without him. Luke had been declared dead after an ambush during their final operation together. His body was flown back with military honors, and Valor, confounded and broken, had refused to leave the cargo bay at the base. He'd laid against the sealed coffin all night, ears perked for a voice that would never return. Now, at the funeral, he was here again. Everyone stood. Everyone cried. But Valor didn't move. His leash was tied loosely to a bench, but he didn't need it. His loyalty was stronger than any rope. He sat there like a soldier at attention, his tail still, his breath slow, his eyes full of something no one could name. "Should we move him?" one of the handlers whispered to Commander Grant. The older officer shook his head, voice cracking. "No, let him grieve. That was his partner." The honor guard raised their rifles and fired the traditional 3-volley salute. The echo thundered through the cemetery. Valor didn't flinch. The sound had once meant combat. Today it meant goodbye. Taps began to play. The haunting notes of the bugle drifted through the cold air, trembling with sorrow. The soldiers saluted. The crowd stood in silence. A Gold Star mother sobbed in the back. But Valor never moved. Children whispered. Cameras flashed. The story of the loyal dog had already started to spread beyond the cemetery walls. But Valor didn't care about any of it. He was waiting for the one thing that couldn't happen. Until something did. A creak, a shift, a movement from within the casket. At first, no one believed it. A soldier stepped forward. Another called out. The chaplain's mites went pale. And then, it happened again. A loud gasp. From inside, the casket was opened in a flurry of motion. Medics rushed. Someone screamed. The flag was pulled back, and gasps turned into tears of disbelief. Inside, pale and weak, but very much alive, was Luke. Alive. His pulse was faint. his breathing shallow. But he was there, and the first thing he saw when his eyes fluttered open was Valor. The German Shepherd leapt forward, leash snapping free, and buried himself against Luke's chest with a cry that shattered every heart in the crowd. It wasn't just barking, it was weeping, desperate, soul-pouring relief. He licked Luke's face, nudged his hand, as if to say, "You came back, I never stopped waiting." And Luke, through cracked lips and tear-filled eyes, whispered the only word he had strength for, Valor. That single moment turned a funeral into a resurrection. The impossible had happened. A soldier returned from the dead. A dog's loyalty had been rewarded. And everyone there, from hardened generals to civilians who had never met Luke, stood in awe of something none of them could explain. Because love, real love, doesn't need explanation. It only needs time and unshakable faith, and Valor had both. Luke Matthews opened his eyes to a world blurred by light and movement. The sounds were muffled, footsteps, distant voices, and something warm pressed against his chest. For a second, he thought he was still back in the field, in the dirt and chaos of their last mission. But the sterile white ceiling and the IV in his arm told him otherwise. He wasn't in Afghanistan. He was home, alive, barely. His chest rose with shallow breaths, his ribs ached, and every muscle felt like it had been torn apart and reassembled. But none of that mattered, because pressed against his side, refusing to bow even as nurses tried to clean and assess him, was a familiar weight. Valor. The German Shepherd lay curled beside him on the hospital bed, eyes closed, his head resting on Luke's shoulder, as if anchoring him to reality. Luke turned his head slightly, wincing with the effort. "You stayed," he whispered. Valor lifted his head and let out a soft whimper, nudging Luke gently with his nose. It was as if he was checking every few seconds to be sure it was real, that his partner was really breathing. The door opened and a nurse entered quietly. "He won't leave," she said with a gentle smile. "We tried." Luke's voice was hoarse but steady. "Don't make him." She nodded. "Wouldn't dream of it." News of Luke's return spread like wildfire. By evening, the hospital parking lot was flooded with journalists, reporters, and fellow soldiers. But the doors remained closed to everyone but a handful of family members and Commander Grant, who arrived that night with tears in his eyes and a bottle of non-alcoholic champagne. "You scared the hell out of all of us," the commander said, gripping Luke's hand. Luke tried to smile. "Didn't mean to. I thought I was gone." "You were," Grant said quietly. Heart stopped. No pulse. "You were in that casket for nearly 5 hours. It's a damn miracle, son." Luke glanced at Valor. He knew. He always knows. Commander Grant looked at the dog, whose ears perked at the sound of his name. "You should have seen him," Grant said. "Wouldn't eat, wouldn't move, guarded that casket like it held the world." "It did," Luke whispered. Back at the cemetery, the burial had been postponed indefinitely. The casket was now symbolic, part of a story that stunned the nation. Social media exploded with photos of Valor beside the flag-covered box. The image was being called the loyalty of a lifetime. People from all walks of life, veterans, civilians, animal lovers, flooded the internet with messages of love, awe, and gratitude. But inside the hospital room, none of that mattered. Luke's body had returned, but part of his mind hadn't. He stared at the ceiling longer than necessary, flinched when doors opened too fast, and refused to talk about what had happened in the moments before he died. The only one who reached him was Valor. Each night, Valor lay at the foot of the bed. If Luke cried out from a nightmare, the dog would be there in an instant, licking his face, grounding him. If Luke's hands trembled from pain or fear, Valor pressed against them like a living shield, but even Valor could sense it. Something inside Luke was broken in a way no surgery could fix. On the third night, Luke turned to the window. Rain tapped softly against the glass. His voice cracked. "Why did I come back?" No one answered, except a warm nose nudging his hand. Luke turned to Valor. "You waited, but I'm not who I was." Valor didn't care. He never had. To him, Luke wasn't a rank, a soldier, or a symbol. He was family. And no matter how deep the wounds went, he wasn't going anywhere. It had been 10 days since Luke opened his eyes inside that casket. The hospital room was now quieter. The reporters had faded. The public fascination had moved on to another miracle, another story. But inside those four walls, Luke Matthews was unraveling. Physically, he was healing. His ribs were mending, the concussion had cleared, and the bruises were fading. But emotionally, something had torn loose and refused to settle. He barely spoke to anyone. When his mother called, he listened in silence. When doctors asked how he was feeling, he answered with a shrug. Even Commander Grant noticed it. "He's here," the commander said to one of the nurses. But not really. But there was one constant: Valor. The canine German Shepherd had not left Luke's side. Hospital staff had eventually stopped trying to suggest the dog be kept out of the recovery room. Everyone understood. Valor wasn't just a companion. He was Luke's lifeline. Still, even Valor was starting to feel the distance. Luke no longer touched him as much. His hand used to rest gently on the dog's back at night, a quiet thank you for his presence, but now it stayed limp at his side. He didn't speak Valor's name, didn't smile when the shepherd brought him one of his favorite toys. There were no commands, no playful remarks, no praise. It was like Luke had become a ghost. One afternoon, during physical therapy, Luke froze halfway through a basic walking exercise. The therapist encouraged him to take another step, but Luke's eyes had clouded over, locked onto something invisible, something far away. "There was fire," he whispered. The therapist looked confused. "Fire?" Luke nodded slowly. "That last day, there was fire and screaming, and I heard Valor barking, but I couldn't move. I thought I was already gone." He gripped the rail, knuckles white. "I heard him digging, clawing at the rubble. I thought, he's not going to stop. He's going to stay there until they pull my bones out." Then Luke's voice cracked. "But I wasn't bones. I came back. And now I don't know why." When the session ended, Luke didn't go back to his room. He walked, slowly, painfully, out to the hospital's garden courtyard. Valor followed, steps in sync, eyes always on him. Luke sat on a bench beneath a maple tree. Autumn leaves swirled down around them. For the first time in days, he looked at Valor. Really looked. "You never gave up, did you?" he asked softly. Valor tilted his head, ears perked. "They told me I flatlined, that there was no reason to keep hoping. But you," Luke's voice caught, "you waited." He reached forward and pressed his forehead to the dog's, their breath mingling in the cool air. "I don't know how to live with that, with knowing you kept believing when I didn't." Valor gave a quiet whine, his eyes full of nothing but patience and love. Luke sat back and let out a shaky breath. "I'm scared, Valor. Not of dunking. Of being back. Of being broken." The German Shepherd stood on his hind legs and placed both front paws gently on Luke's lap. It was a behavior Luke had trained him to do years ago. "Ground me when I lose myself," he used to say. Valor had remembered, even now, even through grief, confusion, and silence. Luke buried his face in Valor's thick fur and sobbed. Not like a soldier, not like a survivor, but like a man who had finally stopped pretending he was okay. And Valor stayed, just like he always had. The hospital discharge papers came on a rainy Thursday morning. Luke stood by the window in his civilian clothes, jeans that no longer fit right, and a hoodie borrowed from a volunteer donation closet. His shoulders felt smaller, his stance uncertain. But when the nurse handed him the folder with his name on it, he only nodded. "You're free to go, Sergeant Matthews," she said with a soft smile. "But remember, healing doesn't end here." Luke didn't answer. He didn't have the words. Valor sat by the door, tail wagging slightly, sensing change. Commander Grant pulled up in a black SUV, umbrella in one hand, and a knowing look in his eyes. "You ready?" he asked. Luke looked at the building behind him, then down at the dog beside him. "No," he said honestly, "but we'll go anyway." The house waiting for him wasn't the same as the one he had left. His military buddies had helped clean it up, restock the fridge, and even left a note on the table that said, "Welcome home, hero." But the house was quiet, and too full of memories. The flag that was supposed to be folded and delivered to his mother still hung over the fireplace. No one had the heart to remove it. Valor sniffed every room, tail wagging when he found Luke's old boots still sitting by the back door. It was familiar. It was safe. But it wasn't enough. Luke lasted 2 days inside the house before the walls began to close in. "I can't stay in here," he told Commander Grant over the phone. "It's too much." "You need to get out," Grant replied. "Go somewhere simple. Go somewhere that reminds you of who you are." That's when Luke remembered the old training grounds, an open field just outside the city where he and Valor had trained for hundreds of hours before their first deployment. It was fenced, private, and empty now. Perfect. The next morning, Luke packed Valor into the truck and drove through the soft morning fog. He didn't expect anyone else to be there. But when he arrived, there were 3 men standing by the gate, strangers, but clearly military. They wore plain tactical gear and had a van marked with a small emblem Luke didn't recognize. One of them stepped forward. "You're Matthews?" "Yeah," Luke said warily. "We've been watching Valor," the man said. "There's interest in him. We believe he's still fit for active service." Luke's heart stopped. "What?" he asked, stepping in front of the dog instinctively. "He's an asset," the man said bluntly, "and highly valuable. The military doesn't usually allow partners to keep K9s after service unless they're declared unfit, but Valor isn't. His loyalty, his skills, they make him ideal for another handler." Luke couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You want to take him back?" The man didn't blink. "It's not personal, it's policy." Luke's hands clenched into fists. "He's not property, he's not a weapon. He's my partner." "Your partner was declared dead. And Valor," the man paused, "was reassigned. Temporarily. But now you're back. And now it's being reviewed." Valor sensed the tension. He stood at Luke's side, rigid, protective. Luke didn't yell. He didn't fight. He just stepped back, placed a hand on Valor's head, and said firmly, "If you try to take him from me, you'll have to explain to the entire country why you're separating a soldier from the one soul who'd never left his side, not even at his own funeral." The men exchanged looks. "We'll be in touch," one of them muttered. And then they left. Luke's legs nearly buckled as the van disappeared down the road. He dropped to his knees in the dirt, wrapping both arms around Valor, who immediately leaned into him. "They're not taking you," Luke whispered. "They can't. I'm not me without you." The shepherd licked his cheek, then rested his head on Luke's shoulder. For the first time since coming back, Luke felt something new. Not just sorrow, not just survival. A reason to fight. It had been 3 days since the men in uniform tried to take Valor. Luke hadn't slept much since. Every creak outside his door made his muscles tense. Every vehicle that slowed in front of the house made his heart race. Valor picked up on his anxiety, pacing the hallways at night, occasionally placing his head on Luke's lap to remind him, "I'm still here." Luke had always known the military viewed dogs like Valor as assets. Heroes, yes, but tools. What he hadn't expected, was a letter delivered by courier that morning. It was stamped Department of Defense, Priority. Inside was a formal notice. A review board was officially investigating Valor's status. He could be reassigned within 2 weeks. Luke stared at the letter, the words going blurry. 2 weeks. They were going to rip Valor away from him, after everything. He crumpled the paper and slammed it against the wall. Valor lifted his head and patted over silently, sitting beside him. "I'm not letting them take you," Luke said, eyes burning. "Not after what we've been through. Not after you brought me back." He opened his laptop and began typing. Emails to senators, to military dog retirement agencies, to any veteran he knew with influence. He contacted the media. He told his story to anyone who would listen. "The dog who waited by my casket," he wrote. "The dog who knew I wasn't gone." Within 48 hours, an article appeared on a national veterans news site. "They want to take the hero. Dog who saved me." Then everything exploded. Thousands of people shared the story. Messages flooded in. "Keep fighting, Sergeant. Valor belongs with you. This bond is stronger than any policy." It didn't take long for a local news crew to show up at his front porch. Luke stood in his yard, Valor at his side as the camera rolled. His voice was steady, but the pain in his eyes was raw. "When I came back, I didn't know who I was anymore," he said. "I didn't even want to be here. But Valor never gave up on me. Not in the field. Not when I was in that casket. Not now. And if they think they can take him from me because of a regulation, they're going to have to take me too." That night, someone knocked on his door. It was Commander Grant. "I've been watching this unfold," he said, stepping inside. "And there's something you need to see." He handed Luke a file. Confidential, black cover, no markings. "What is this?" Luke asked. Grant hesitated. "Something I wasn't supposed to show you." Luke opened it. Inside were pages of reports, missions, evaluations, handler logs. But what stopped him cold was a name. Valor. And underneath it, another handler's name. A man Luke didn't recognize. "Before Valor was assigned to you," Grant explained, "he was partnered with another soldier. They were deployed in Syria. Something happened. An ambush. The handler didn't make it, but Valor did. He stayed beside the body for 2 days until recovery crews arrived." Luke's throat tightened. "That's why he was so fiercely loyal," Grant continued. "He knew loss. He knew death. And when he met you, he wasn't just serving, he was healing too." Luke's hand moved to Valor's collar. They were going to assign him again? After all that? Grant nodded grimly. "They don't see the heart, just the stats." Luke stood, eyes hard now. "Then, I'll show them." The next morning, Luke posted a video online. Just him and Valor. No music, no edits, just truth. He looked into the camera and said, "This dog has saved 2 lives. His first handler's memory, and mine. Taking him from me now would be like tearing my soul apart. So I'm asking, not as a soldier, but as a man, let us stay together." The video went viral. By nightfall, the Pentagon's Public Affairs Office issued a statement. "In light of Sergeant Matthews's unique circumstances and the extraordinary service of K9 Valor, we are pleased to announce that Valor will remain permanently in the care of his original handler." Luke dropped the phone and fell to his knees, arms wrapped around Valor. The battle was over. but something deeper had been won. The world didn't change overnight. The headlines faded. The comments stopped. But inside Luke's small house, just outside Fort Benning, something had changed. Something deeper than a news story or a military file. For the first time in months, Luke Matthews woke up without panic in his chest. Sunlight filtered through the curtains. A warm weight rested against his legs. Valor, of course. His eyes opened the second Luke stirred, tail thumping against the bed frame. "Morning, buddy," Luke whispered. And for once, he meant it. That morning, Luke did something he hadn't done since returning home. He put on real clothes. He laced his boots. He made coffee, and not the instant kind either, but actual brewed coffee, the kind that filled the kitchen with the smell of being alive. Valor followed his every move, hopeful but cautious. He sensed the shift. Luke's movements were more sure, more grounded. His eyes had life behind them again. They went outside together. No leash, no command. Just two soldiers walking into the day. At the edge of the backyard, Luke stopped. He looked at the small storage shed, untouched since his return. For weeks, he couldn't even look at it. It was where his deployment bags had been kept, where his old training gear was stored, where Valor's early awards were boxed up in a plastic bin, hidden away like they didn't matter anymore. But today, Luke walked to the shed, unlocked it, and opened the door. Dust filled the air. The sun caught on old medals, collars, and patches. Everything was exactly as he'd left it. He knelt down and picked up one of Valor's early harnesses. Black nylon, slightly frayed at the edges, with the faded patch that read, "Protect, serve, never back down." He ran his fingers across it, remembering the missions they'd done, the things they'd survived. He turned to Valor, who stood just outside the doorway, watching silently. "You remember this?" Luke asked with a soft laugh. Valor stepped forward and nosed the harness gently, as if to say, "How could I forget?" Luke smiled. "Let's give it one more ride." That afternoon, they returned to the training grounds. This time, no strangers waited for them. No cameras, no suits, just Luke, Valor, and the field they knew like the back of their hands. Luke stood at one end. Valor waited at the other, tense, ready. "Come," Luke said. Valor launched forward, not just running, but flying. His legs kicked up clouds of dust. His eyes locked onto Luke like they'd never been apart. Luke gave commands like muscle memory. Left, sit, stay, heel. And Valor obeyed every single one. But more than that, he enjoyed it. His tail wagged, his eyes sparkled. He was back in his element. And so was Luke. After the final run, they collapsed into the grass, both breathing hard. Luke looked up at the sky, eyes glassy. "I forgot how much I needed this," he whispered. "Not the war, not the title, just this, just us." Valor rolled onto his side and let out a big huff, resting his head on Luke's stomach. They stayed there for a long time. Man and dog, survivor and savior, broken and healing, together. The next day, Luke called Commander Grant. "I think I know what I want to do now," he said. "Yeah. I want to start a program for vets and K9s. I want to train them together, not just to fight, to recover, to live again." There was silence on the other end. Then Grant spoke, his voice low. "That's the best thing I've heard in a long time." So that's what they did. Weeks passed. Luke filed the paperwork. He reached out to fellow soldiers, rescued retired K9s, started training sessions in that same old field. They named the program Second Watch. Because not everyone gets a second chance, but some do. And when they do, they need someone who understands. Luke stood at the gate one morning, clipboard in hand, watching as a young veteran hesitated by the fence. A German shepherd sat beside him, skittish and scarred. Luke smiled. "You're in the right place," he said gently. And Valor, standing beside him with calm eyes and steady breath, took one slow step forward. A new bond was about to begin. 2 years later, the sun had just begun to rise over the quiet fields of Second Watch, bathing the grass in gold. The place had grown. Fences now surrounded multiple training zones. A converted barn served as a welcome center, and the old storage shed had been turned into a memorial space for fallen K and handlers. But the scale of the program remained unchanged. It was in the quiet steps of young veterans learning to trust again, in the soft panting of rescue dogs feeling safe for the first time in years, in the firm, calm voice of a man who once came back from the dead. Luke Matthews. He stood by the edge of the field, arms crossed, watching a new recruit guide a black German shepherd through an obstacle course. His gaze was steady, but his heart heavier today. Valor stood beside him, older now, his muzzle touched with gray, his movements slower, but his eyes were still sharp, still loyal, still his. "You did good today," Luke whispered, kneeling beside him. Valor leaned into him, his weight pressing against Luke's shoulder. That afternoon, the two of them sat in the old truck and drove to a quiet hill just outside town. It was the same place Valor used to train, before the war, before the casket, before the world turned upside down. Luke laid out a blanket. Valor laid beside him, breathing slow, his chest rising and falling with effort. The vet had said it was only a matter of time now. His heart was weakening. The years of service, the wounds, the stress, they'd all taken their toll. Luke had known this day would come, but knowing didn't make it easier. He looked out at the horizon, voice breaking as he spoke. "You saved me," he whispered. "Not just in the field, but afterward, when I couldn't see the point in staying." Valor's ears twitched. "I was a folded flag in a box, Valor. I was in, but you waited. You knew. You never gave up." Luke placed a hand over Valor's chest, feeling the slow rhythm of his heartbeat. "I don't know if I'll ever have another partner. I don't know if I want to, because there's only one you." The sun began to dip behind the trees. Luke laid down beside him, head resting gently against the dog's back. "I'm here," he whispered. He stayed there for hours, and when the stars finally came out, Valor let out one last breath, a soft, quiet exhale, and went still, wrapped in the arms of the only human he had ever truly loved. Luke didn't cry right away. He just held him, until his arms grew numb, until the world turned cold, until the silence was louder than anything he'd ever known. At Valor's memorial, the field was packed. Veterans, dogs, families, reporters. No cameras were allowed inside the private service, just people who understood what it meant to lose someone who never left your side. Luke stood alone at the front, holding a folded flag in his hands. "He waited for me," he said quietly. "So I stayed with him until the end. That's what loyalty means. That's what love looks like when it's real." He placed the flag in a glass case beside Valor's final harness. A plaque beneath it read, "Protect, serve, never back down." K9 Valor, partner, hero, brother. As people began to leave, a young woman with a service dog approached Luke. She had tears in her eyes. "You gave me hope," she said. Luke looked down at her dog, then back at her. "No," he replied softly. He did. And in that quiet, sacred place, where pain and love met, a legacy was born, not of war or death, but of loyalty that went beyond the grave. Because sometimes the strongest hearts walk on 4 legs. If this story moved you, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone who believes in loyalty, healing, and second chances. Let valor's legacy live on, not just as a story, but as a reminder true love never leaves.